Welcome to Gutsy Talks. I'm Rachel Larson, your host, naturopath, and nutritionist, and I'm here to have real, honest conversations that can help you heal your gut, calm your mind, and fall back in love with food. Together with leading health experts, we'll dive into all things gut health and explore the deep connections between your gut and overall well-being, so you can feel empowered to take control of your health and live your best life. If you love all things gut health, follow me for more on Instagram at rachel.larson or head to rachellarson.com.au. Now, let's get into today's episode. Today's guest is Luka McCabe, the brilliant founder and director of Boob and the best-selling author of Milk to Meals. With a background as a registered midwife and nurse, Luka brings a powerful combination of clinical knowledge and real-life parenting experience to the conversation. As a mum of three, she understands just how overwhelming starting solids can feel, especially with so much conflicting advice out there. And that's exactly why she created Boob to inspire, inform, and educate caregivers on their baby's journey from milk to meals. In today's episode, we're exploring the big questions around introducing solids, how to approach the baby-led weaning versus spoon feeding decision, what to know about allergen introduction, and how to feel confident during this important stage. So, Luka, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here, but I think more than me, my sisters who already have children are excited that I'm interviewing you. And when they heard that you were on, my older sister said, you have to let her know that her book is my Bible. I use it every day. It's on the counter. So thank you on behalf of her, and also for helping my nieces have a cracking start to life.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Oh, I mean, what you do is just so incredible. And I guess for people who aren't familiar with you and maybe this is their first, exposure to you, can you tell us how you came up with this incredible business, Boob to Food?
Yeah, well, it definitely was never meant to be a business endeavor. It was purely, I guess, my kids are nearly 10, 7, and nearly 4 now. And with my nearly 10-year-old, I attended a few sort of naturopathic, I guess, workshops when he was young. And one of them was on starting solids. And it was just really different information than I had ever heard before. It was not the typical offer them rice cereal. It wasn't the just give them the jarred food, the pouches. And they kind of went into the why of why we should be nourishing them from the get-go, nourishing their gut, supporting their gut, focusing on iron-rich foods, etc. And it really just led me down a pathway of learning how to cook again. I'd never cooked, I guess I would probably call the word maybe a bit ancestrally, maybe, the way that we recommend feeding little ones. And so that was not the way that we ate quite well, but we didn't eat that way. So I learned how to make bone broth, and I learned how to cook liver, and I learned about the importance of all of these beautiful, like iron-rich foods that were often forgotten. And then I offered them to my little guy, and then we started eating them as well. Anyway, and I got a lot of comments about it back then, so this is nearly 10 years ago, that it was really unusual the way that I was feeding him. First, it started off being kind of ridiculed, and then the comments turned into questions. And then, I guess people were sick of feeling sick of being told to feed something that maybe didn't align with them, and wondering why are they starting on rice cereal and foods that we wouldn't eat. Anyway, and then the questions, I guess, kept building, and I just love to share it with my friends and family. And then when my daughter started solids, I just thought I might just share it on Instagram. There was no real accounts like mine at the time. There's a lot now, but there was nothing like that. And my intention was just to share what I was feeding her, but mainly what the reason was. My background is I'm a midwife and a nurse, and I've always loved education. And so I just found it quite fun. And then anyway, basically it just snowballed into a business somehow, and people enjoyed it. And yeah, we've been trying to play catch up ever since.
Wow. I mean, I love that. And you often hear stories of where, I guess, I don't know if desperation is the right word, but curious, or just like there's a gap in something where you're like, hang on a second, like, why isn't there more information about this? Or why isn't this more well known? So to actually lead into that and create what you've created, there are literally thousands of families that are listening to you and learning from you, my sister included. And she feels really empowered doing that. And I think, I was so excited and I wanted to have you on here because I mostly work with adult gut issues in my clinic, but I mean, babies have guts, right? And we know that like this is kind of where a lot of our foundations begin. I mean, obviously it, predates that when we're talking about the mother's health and gestation and all those types of things as well. But that food introduction and those exposures that we get at the early stages of life can absolutely set up our guts for the rest of our lives. So I thought, wow, why not again touch an audience that may not be actually in your field at the moment with that information for when they have kids, or even reflecting on their own experience growing up and what they were exposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, they do have guts, developing guts too. So they're often a lot more sensitive than in adults.
Oh, totally. So I
Mm,
guess let's start back for someone who is, maybe we're looking at their breastfeeding, and let's assume, I guess, for this conversation, they are breastfeeding or at least pre-solids at this stage.
mm.
At what time frame or at how long is the science saying we want to be keeping them to breastfeeding or liquids before we start introducing solids in terms of an allergy prevention or a gut perspective? What's that time frame we're looking at?
Yeah, so all of the research recommends currently, at the time of recording, it changes all
Yes.
the time,
Yep.
that the milk, so whether that be breast milk, formula, or express breast milk, be their primary source of nutrition until they start solids, which is around 6 months, but not before 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of a grey window between 4 and 6 months. Basically, the idea is that they start solids when they're developmentally ready to start solids. So the signs of developmental readiness are that they can sit up unassisted to a degree. Basically, we say if they can sort of sit on your lap or sit in a high chair and not flop around, that their head is nice and strong, that they're not like flopping their airway forward, that they can reach and grab for food, that they're interested in food. There's some really good signs that they're ready to start solids. And usually that starts around the 6 month mark, which is why they gave that guideline. But babies aren't robots and they don't all just click over at 6 months and they're ready.
Yep.
Some babies aren't ready till closer to 7 months, and some are ready around that 5 month mark. So that's kind of the rough guideline. But in saying that, their milk should still be their priority until around 12 months of age. So solids, as much as I have a love-hate relationship with this saying food before one is just for fun,
Yep.
it is a little bit about fun. It's about exploration. There's a lot for them to learn. They do have some nutritional requirements, which is why I have a love-hate relationship with that saying. But it is also does take a bit of that pressure off because they are getting most of their nutrients through their milk feeds, whether that be breast milk or formula.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's good to know. So at the moment, again, at time of recording, that it is not before 4 months, but it
Mm,
could be later. Is there, I guess, and because I think there's a term that comes up, that gut immune window. So is
mm.
that what we're talking about when we're talking about that more ideal time, or that we want to start introducing some sort of foods? And is there a time where I guess it's too late, where they kind of surpass that window?
Like, I wouldn't say it's too late. The research is showing that the earlier we can introduce allergens, the less reactions that they're getting. But also the research shows that it's about keeping the allergens in the diet. So there's sort of two parts to it.
Yep.
The research says early and often, and a lot of people have sort of interpreted that earliness as, starting at 4 months, but that's actually not true. The reason that they've written that 4 month sort of window in there is that's because that's when some people do start solids. So basically it's whenever your baby's developmentally ready to start solids is when you would also start introducing the top allergens, the top 9 allergens, because the research has shown that it's that early and often will help. And that was done by a big trial called the LEAP study, which showed a really big decrease in the incidence of peanut allergy. So there is that sort of sweet spot in terms of allergen introduction. But yes, you don't want to do it more earlier than 4 months because their gut is too immature to handle food. Also, we don't want to be displacing their milk feeds. That's really the priority. So it can, yes, be too stressful on their immature gut. And saying that the only, I guess, downfall with starting too late, if your baby, maybe is hitting that 7 month mark and is still not showing signs of readiness. They do have some high iron requirements, and that's probably our biggest concern at this age, is that we want to start getting some iron-rich foods into them, because that I guess they kind of have some stores until that 6 month mark, which usually is from in utero.
Yeah.
And, you know, different things can affect this, like the mum's iron stores in pregnancy, or when the cord was clamped and cut, for example, or the type of birth. And so that, you know, that was 6 months is a bit of a grey window where
Yes.
their iron stores will be okay until. And usually that's another sign that they're ready for solids, because they're saying, okay, I need some more iron. My body's showing that I need some stuff now.
And that's interesting that there's that nutritional requirement, aspect. But again, like we're saying, we have to work with a sense of guideline versus actual, like once the clock ticks over to 4 months or 7 months or whatever it is, that this is when it happens, because there's just a bit more that goes into the differences in children and how we're, their beginnings in life. So in terms of the timing of introducing allergies, and you mentioned like the top 9 allergies,
Mm.
like, is there ones that we have to introduce before others? Like, how do we start introducing them? What does the research say about these really common, I guess, the top 9 allergens that we're trying to navigate and, I guess, get that exposure to?
Yeah, so there's top 9. I'll rattle them off if I can try and remember them all. There's peanuts, tree nuts, egg, sesame, fish, shellfish, dairy, wheat, and soy is the top 9 allergens.
I think you did it.
I did. Yes. They're always in a different order, but somehow I get there. So there are top 9 allergens. They're the ones that we want to focus on that early and often. The research shows that there is no right or wrong in terms of which ones you introduce first. Realistically, we say the best thing you can do is the things that you want to eat as a family, or that you eat most as a family, introduce them first, so that you can start offering family meals without the worry.
That makes
So
sense.
if you eat, for me, egg was a big priority because we have eggs nearly every morning. And then if I could share that, especially with my third child, I don't have time to make him a spare meal. So egg was probably like one of our first ones. One that I do think is great to introduce early is peanut, because that was the one that was studied to help. So I do like to say, if you wanted a timeline, we do have a timeline in Milk to Meals, our book, because I know that some people do just like specific timelines, but realistically it doesn't really matter, because some cultures will eat a lot of soy, for example, and some cultures will eat a lot of fish. And so it just depends what suits you guys.
And in terms of, you say, like to expose it to them often, what does that mean? Does that mean daily, weekly? Again, is it a little bit more like, not as direct as that? Like, what kind of guidelines is kind of around that? How frequent we want to be giving those exposures to?
Yeah, so the research is very grey and emerging.
Cool.
Yeah, because it is kind of all new. I think from memory, the LEAP study was done in 2000 and I want to say 18, but that could be wrong, but a while ago.
Yeah.
But the research on the keeping it in the diet often is still very much evolving. When we had last spoken to allergists about this, the guidelines have said kind of aiming for like once a week if you can. However, there's 9 top allergens. With the tree nuts, for example, there's like 10 different tree nuts that are all different species within the tree nuts. So when you put your mum hat on and you think, okay, so I've got to keep like 19 foods in the diet every week, it's just not feasible. Or I couldn't tell you the last time like any of my kids probably had shellfish.
Yes.
Mainly because I don't like it and I'm not going to buy it for them.
Yeah.
So I think you can only do what you can do. The idea is that you introduce the allergens 3 times at least to sort of tick it off the list and say, okay, that's okay. Because the first time the body might not realize it's allergic to that food. It's got to first sort of be introduced to that food to realize. And sometimes that introduction can be from breast milk, or it can be from you touching it. And then, you won't always know. They might have had some kind of exposure before. You might have wiped a peanut butter base that you've eaten toast onto them. But generally speaking, they won't often have an allergic reaction the first time because they haven't had that exposure yet. And their body hasn't realized that, hey, I don't really like this protein in the food, and I'm going to react next time that it comes near me. So it builds up that immune guard to say, hey, next time I see this food, I'm going to attack it. And that's what that immune response that we see is. So we want to at least introduce it 3 times, because sometimes it can take 3 times. It can also take more times. Like sometimes you might get a reaction on the 5th introduction or the 6th or the 7th.
Yeah.
There's no rhyme and reason to it. But usually if you can introduce it 3 times, we can kind of say, okay, tick that off the list. But then the idea is then you don't just not introduce it again.
For sure.
Yeah. So the allergist that we have spoken to that works with us and doing some content and things has basically said, look, whatever is the priorities for your family, the things you're going to be eating a lot of, the things that you like to cook with, just keep trying to keep them in the diet as much as you can. Because we do get questions from people who are maybe a plant-based family and they say, well, okay, I'll introduce egg 3 times, but I don't want to keep it in the diet. Then realistically, there's not actually much point introducing it in the first place, because you're not going to keep it in the diet, and that can actually lead to allergies anyway. So it's a bit grey. There's no real, they say weekly, but yes, it's also just trying to work out how you can fit that in your family.
Oh, and like, I mean, even with the incredible resources that you have, there's still obviously lots of grey. We've said that a few times, lots of emerging, and
Yes.
there's not the strict timelines, which I mean, gosh, what human actually adheres to any sort of, set out timeline? We all kind of do things in our own way. So I can completely understand while there's room, I guess, for people to still have a few questions about if they're doing it right, and is this normal, and those types of things. But I guess in terms of allergies, like some of the big things I guess parents are concerned about is if they do have an allergy, like what signs are they looking out for, and what do they do if their baby is having some sort of allergic reaction to these foods?
And I should also note, when I had my firstborn, who, like I mentioned, is nearly 10, the advice was to not give any allergens until they were 5. So things have changed like a complete 180 since I had him. So this would mean things keep changing. So was your question if they have a reaction?
Yeah, like
Sorry, what are we looking for?
Yeah, what are they looking for? What do parents do with that?
Yeah. So I guess if you were to introduce the allergen, basically you want to introduce a very small amount to start with, like literally 1/8 of a teaspoon maybe. Pop it in their mouth. You don't want to rub it on the skin or anything like that, because that can actually lead to further allergic reactions. It doesn't really tell us much anyway, so they need to actually have an oral exposure and eat the food. So say, for example, we're going to do peanut butter. You can just pop a tiny bit on your finger or a tiny, tiny bit on a spoon, let them put it into their mouth, and then just wait 5 to 10 minutes and just see if they have any reaction. If they're going to have an acute allergic reaction, it will happen in that first 5 to 10 minutes, but IgE response, they call it, can take up to 2 hours to happen. So they can have a delayed reaction, but those ones that are those scary, the anaphylaxis that everyone worries about will generally happen in that first 5 to 10 minutes. So give it 5 to 10 minutes, pop it in their mouth, see how they go. If they're okay, then you can either offer them a bit more on that sitting, or wait till the next day and then offer them a little bit more. And basically you just sort of increase it, maybe to 1/4 of a teaspoon, then 1/2 of a teaspoon, and then you can just go for gold however much you want to introduce.
Yep.
Things you're looking out for though, like I mentioned, anaphylaxis is the big warning sign that we're looking for. Basically, it's just, they're all sort of signs of inflammation that we're looking for. So that would include swelling of the airways. Usually you would hear something like a wheezing, their breathing would change. They might have a real panic look on their face. They might get an itchy tongue, which obviously they can't tell us, but you might notice that they start to sort of scratch their tongue or seem really irritated by their tongue.
Yep.
And then if you looked in their mouth, it might look a bit swollen. That would require you to ring an ambulance and seek urgent medical attention.
Yeah.
For the majority of babies though, because like I said, you've got to have a couple of exposures to get to that point of anaphylaxis. You usually hear of anaphylaxis more if you've kind of missed the signs the first time or second time, and then you've given it again, which is why you hear of older kids having anaphylaxis a lot more, because they've already had those exposures to the allergen, and then their body is very well equipped to fight that allergen if they come in contact with it again.
Yeah, throws everything at it.
Yes, yeah. So usually for our little ones, things that we seem to see more are like hives. So a hive reaction, like an inflammatory reaction on their body. It can kind of occur anywhere. Is often where the food sort of hits. You'll see it a lot more, but it can be all over the body, usually on the back, the chest. We're also, sometimes it can be accompanied by vomiting.
Yeah.
And yeah, any just sort of swelling, breathing changes, that kind of thing is what we're looking for.
So there's like, for me, when I'm hearing that, it's, I guess, not too different to adult, kind of signs as well of different allergies and things. But I guess when we're talking about, and I think that was really helpful what you mentioned about the timing in terms of,
Yes.
more that allergy could be that 5 to 10 minutes, maybe that IgG is a couple of hours, like just in terms of maybe trying to discern between what is happening. But I think what you're saying is like it can sometimes take a couple of exposures for some things to come out. So there's a
Mm.
sense of, I guess, just awareness and vigilance, even maybe after the 2, 3 times. So
Yes.
one thing that, because I was talking to, again, I'm thinking of my sister who loves your book. And I was like, what are some things that, because I'm not a mother yet myself, so these are questions from my loved ones, but you know, I guess amongst their friends or her friends, there was a lot of, I guess, confusion about cow's milk protein allergy and intolerance, um,
Mm.
CMPA, CMPI. Um,
Hmm.
how are they different in terms of presentation? And for people who aren't aware, I guess, of the difference between an allergy and intolerance, can you explain that?
Yes. I'm not an allergist, but I can explain what
Well, we
I
love we love
can regurgitate from who I work with.
we love that.
Basically, though, so your allergies are your IgE mediated, so they're an immune mediated response. And a big depiction of the two different ones is the timing. So
Mm,
we're looking at that acute response, it's usually within that 2 hour window.
yeah.
With our like intolerances, sensitivities, that sort of thing, usually it's non-IgE mediated, so it's not immune related. It's often gut based. And the big thing for that is the timing. So
Mm,
often it will be after the 2 hour mark that you'll see, and it can be up to three days after they've eaten the
yeah.
food that you can see things. The only difference there is CMPA, which is the cow's milk protein allergy, which is an allergy, but that they often grow out of.
Mm,
But again, with a delayed response, often with that, which is usually you'll see it in the bowel, they usually get blood in the stool.
yeah.
Basically, it's you're looking though for not inflammatory markers with these things.
Yeah.
So it's usually things like digestive discomfort that you'd be looking at. You'd be looking at things like it's exacerbating their reflux. They've got blood in the stool. They're unsettled when they're feeding.
Mm,
Maybe eczema is getting, if they haven't had it before, they've got it, or if it flares up,
yeah.
maybe they're getting constipated, which, often is, or diarrhea. Like we're often looking at more of those symptoms, rather than that IgE response with an allergy.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I think as well, like for these things, if I guess like there would probably have to be a next level of intervention if they thought there was some sort of cow's milk protein issue in terms of they'd
Mm.
probably be following up with maybe a GP or getting referred to an allergist to try to understand that better. Because if you see blood in your stools, you're probably not going to think, oh, it's just a little, it's just the cow's milk protein. Like you're probably going to be thinking, and you should be, I guess, in terms of blood in stools is a red flag symptom, which
Yes.
means send off. So we don't kind of assume that it could be something like, so we kind of go. So if you're
Mm.
listening to this thinking, wow, like I still wouldn't know how to navigate that, there would probably be signs that where you'd be wanting to go and actually speak to someone anyway to help you through this. But it's good to
Mm.
know, I guess, have a bit of a gist in terms of what to look out for.
Oh, just a note on that. I
Yeah.
feel like, yes, like you mentioned, CMPA is usually quite well diagnosed. I
Mm.
feel like it's quite common, and usually it's a very quick result. You take the cow's milk out and they're better,
Yeah.
which is great. So that one, I feel like, and like I've mentioned, they're often grow out of, which is great. By usually you have 6-ish months off of the cow's milk, and then you sort of have work with the plan to reintroduce it again.
Yeah.
The ones that we seem to see more misdiagnosed or not well managed
Yep.
is constipation and eczema. We often see that these little ones are just given a laxative, for example, and told
Mm,
that it's okay, which we get really frustrated by, because constipation in a baby or an adult should never be considered as normal.
for sure.
And a lot of the time that gets written off as a normal thing when you start solids, but actually it's usually a sign that their gut might need some more support, or their diet might need tailoring, or maybe they might need a specific probiotic supplement because they might have had a specific type of birth that has, impacted their gut. And so there's so much that can be done, and it really frustrates us when that's just written off as normal when it's not.
Oh, look, I mean, preaching to the choir here. I mean, but these are the things, because I see adults that have had these constipation issues. Who knows what the reason was when they were younger, but have continued, but their whole life, because that's always been their picture has been classified as normal. And we dig deeper, and there's a ton of stuff going on, which shouldn't be, which is causing that. So I think that's important to know as well. And I guess for people from a constipative perspective, like what is, I guess, in that, because nothing is ever like this is the normal thing, but like what is that range of, I guess, what can we want to be seeing in terms of bowel motions for our little ones in terms of what's normal?
Look, it's similar. It depends which age of infants you're talking about, because, a purely breastfed infant might poo feels like 20 times a day.
Yeah.
But, if I talk about when we're starting solids, we would expect at least one bowel motion a day.
Yeah.
So same as an adult.
Yeah.
Minimum every second day.
Yeah.
I guess, and more than that can be normal. If they're having a lot of breast milk, it can be normal to have more than that bowel motions, because there's no fiber in breast milk, so it kind of just passes through.
Yeah.
But basically, when they start solids, we would still expect them to go, at least every day, because they're getting bulk to the stool, so it needs to come out now.
Sure does. Absolutely does.
Yes.
Tell us now about, I guess, some of the first foods that we want to be introducing to support, I guess, their gut from really the beginnings of those solids.
So I guess I kind of alluded to it before. If I had to put a name on it, we'd call it maybe like a bit of an ancestral diet. I don't like labeling it too much, but just a whole foods diet. We do heavily advocate for animal-based foods purely because, like I mentioned, their iron requirements are quite high. So are their zinc, so is their DHA, omega-3s, B12, all of these things that, because they're eating such small amounts of food, it's hard to get enough of from just plants alone. And so we do have a plant-based ebook, and we do have a lot of mentions of it in Milk to Meals, because of course we want to be supportive and inclusive of anyone.
Sure.
And, some people are allergic to meat and so can't eat it. And there's all different reasons for not eating it. But if you do follow an omnivorous diet, that's what we would generally recommend, because meat is the easiest way to meet their iron and zinc and B12, etc. requirements. Plus they have those foods have the synergistic nutrients to help with the absorption and all those cofactors to help the absorption of the iron. And they're also really easily digested by most babies as well, which is great. So we just focus on whole foods, thinking back to what was here when cavemen were here, what foods were around then, and going from there. So you'll see us promoting, like I mentioned, a lot of slow cooked meats we really like. One, because they're easy to eat for our little ones, especially if you're following baby-led weaning, because they're nice and soft and tender. But also, they're really high in glycine, because they've got cooked with the bones in often. And so you're getting all of that beautiful collagen through it, which is really gut supportive. High in iron, zinc, etc., etc. Great for the whole family to eat too, because I can't be bothered to make more than one meal.
Yep, definitely. So, this time.
Yeah, any slow cooked meats. I have a brisket in the oven right now. I love anything slow cooked, because one, I can put it on in the morning and not have to think about it later.
Yeah.
And two, everyone likes them, which is great. So yeah, like osso bucco is great. Lamb shanks are beautiful. Slow cooked chicken, anything like that. We really love liver, because it's like nature's powerhouse. It's got the most nutrients of any food on the planet.
Yep.
And so that's a really great one for babies. Super easy to, get up their iron when they're having foods like liver. So like a pate or something can be really great. And then obviously we've just cooked veggies are amazing. I like to just put them into the slow cooked meat just to make life easy. Just have a little nice and cooked. But then I also love things like bone broth. Like I mentioned at the beginning, when I learned how to make bone broth, that's now a weekly staple in our house. And we just sort of add it to all foods, again, into the slow cooked meats. It's great.
Yep.
Fermented foods were beautiful as well. We love to start little ones on fermented foods. there's we get so many questions like what probiotic can my kid be on? How do we boost? It's always the word boost the
Yeah.
immune system. What probiotics should I buy from the shops? Blah blah blah. And I always, we used to think that the more probiotics the better, the more strains the better. Now we know that targeted supplementation is so much better, and specific strains are so much better if you
Yeah.
need it.
Yeah.
But probiotics are expensive, and we don't need to rely on supplements. We have it in food, and our fermented foods have so much diverse culture of bacteria that's good for our guts. So I love foods like sauerkraut for little babies. You can start with just the brine. You don't need to
Yes.
give a lot because they're quite powerful and strong. And sometimes you can kind of, I always like to, does anyone remember, do you remember that Inner Health Plus ad that was on
Yes.
TV with the seesaw?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like you can kind of throw your good bacteria too far as well. So you want to just little bits at a time, just give little bits of the brine, a little bit on a spoon, dip a little bit of food in it, add a little bit of yogurt. Yogurt's another beautiful one. Any fermented foods, kefir, beetroot kvass if you can access that. My
Yep.
kids used to love kvass.
I've made that before, and I have had an
Oh,
accident where there's beetroot all over my ceiling.
yeah.
So don't let that anyone deter, but that one's a good one too.
I have never made kvass. We can buy it from our farmer's market, so I just buy it because it's easier.
Yeah, please do after my
Yes.
experience.
Yeah. I make the sauerkraut just because that's so easy. But yeah, anything fermented is beautiful. And then, from a nutrient perspective, things like your fatty fish are beautiful as well.
Mm.
Sardines are great for babies. They're also super high in calcium if you eat the bones.
Yep.
And then the allergens, like we talked about, egg yolk is one of my favorite. You've got to give the white too from an allergy perspective, but the yolk is like that nutrient powerhouse that I used to just spoon into everything for my kids. So
You
there's a
know,
few. Do you want me to keep rattling off?
I mean, I'm just listening to this thinking that's what we should all be eating. And this is, I
Well,
guess, what
yeah.
this is. Yeah, you just like, of course, because it's food. But
Yeah.
I think that's we kind of maybe overcomplicate things, and it's no one's fault
Mm.
given there's so much information out there.
Hmm.
But you're saying the exact same things that I talk to my patients. Obviously, as a side note, if you've got histamine issues, the fermented food things and the slow cooked things may not be
Mm.
appropriate at this point. But that's just for that portion of people. For the rest of
Mm.
us, what you're saying is absolutely on point, from the fermented foods to the fiber to the whole foods. And even when we talk about the role of probiotics, absolutely, we want targeted treatments if needed. And if not, don't take it. Like, I don't take a probiotic,
No.
like it's just, I don't need to at this point in my life. And I upkeep my microbiome, as do
Mm.
you, with all the foods that you were saying, and we can get in new bugs and diversity
Mm.
through all these different things. So hopefully for people hearing that, it kind of like that's a good thing to hear, where it's like, oh, it's actually kind of exactly what I should be eating, but just introduce it in a certain way,
Mm.
for little kids, or in a smaller amount. It doesn't have to be a completely different diet.
It's so true. One thing that my favorite bit of feedback that I've just loved since, launching Boob to Food and Milk to Meals, especially, is that so many parents have said how it has changed their own diet from reading and learning, because everyone wants the best for their children,
Yeah.
especially someone listening to a podcast like this is obviously very invested in their child's health. And so, learning about their gut and their needs just makes you reflect on your own and think, oh, actually, I probably need that too.
Yeah.
And then, like I've said a few times, you can't be bothered to make more than one meal. So then you just make the one thing that can suit all of you, which is so much easier. And then also, there's so many benefits in that from a complete different perspective, in like little ones learning to trust food and watching us eat and learning how to chew the food and, what we
Mm.
would expect them to do. We can't expect them to feed a different meal and then get them to get to toddlerhood and think that, oh, okay, now they can just feed what we eat,
Yeah.
and they've never done that before because they're going to reject it. So they
Yeah.
need to get used to eating as a family and watching what we eat and everyone eating the same meal. Maybe it's a little bit changed. Maybe you got a bit of chili on yours, or,
Yeah.
maybe they've got a little bit pulled out before you've added something in or whatever.
Yeah.
But basically we're having the same food at the same time.
I love that. The domino effect is great. And I think what you said rings totally true, is that there's now that accountability on, oh my goodness, my child is now learning, I guess, from me as well. Like
Mm.
I probably shouldn't be ducking off to Macca's,
Yeah.
or opting for just, refined bread with like a nothing spread on it versus something that's a lot more wholesome because they're going to see that and think
Mm.
what's mum or dad or whoever doing. What you mentioned before about, I guess, food introduction, you mentioned baby-led weaning,
Mhm.
and I want to talk about that a bit because, spoon feeding, purees, like I guess like how do people decide what's best, pros and cons? Talk to me
Yeah.
about it.
Hot topic. Look, it doesn't. I think there's a lot of I don't know, hierarchy maybe, and some people saying that they do baby led weaning over spoon feeding. It
Mm,
really doesn't matter what you start with. I've started all of my kids on different trajectories and they've all
yep.
ended up in the same place. It really doesn't matter. I think the biggest thing is it comes down to parental anxiety levels and what you feel comfortable with. A lot
Yeah.
of parents will feel really anxious feeding finger foods from the get go, and that's okay to not do that, because we want meal times to be enjoyable. And if every time your baby has a little gag or, puts a bit of food in their mouth and you're hovering over them, staring at them or whacking them in the back or putting your fingers down their throat every time they do that, that's not going to be enjoyable. So,
For no one.
no, for no one, exactly. We want you to be able to just sit there and eat your meal with them. There's so many benefits to baby led weaning, but it doesn't have to be from the very beginning.
Mm,
So basically, our kind of golden rule is that you would start finger foods by at least 9 months. They don't
yep.
have to be on full finger foods by then, but at least be having some,
Yeah.
because there is a bit of a window of opportunity with introducing different textures and how food looks and feels. And when you're introducing only puree, they're not learning that chewing skill and they're not learning how to map the mouth. And so gagging will still happen, but just later, and they'll have less protective mechanisms in place because they're all kind of in place as they're younger.
Yeah.
They usually gag very early because their gag reflex is quite far forward in the mouth. Whereas as they get older, it goes back. So that risk of choking is a little bit increased. But yeah, like I said, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You
Mm,
can do a mix of both from the beginning. And, your child's going to decide for you. Like
mm.
my firstborn, he was on purees for, I don't know, a few months and then I transitioned. But my daughter, my middle child, I made all these beautiful purees and then gave it to her and she absolutely rejected them from
Not
the get
happening.
go and only wanted finger food because that's what her older brother had.
Yeah.
And so that's funny. One of the recipes in the book is like a gelatin gummy made from baby puree from
Oh, yeah.
because and this is when gummies weren't like a thing. I was just literally inventing
Yeah.
things that were so random. Now that it's a bit more known about, but because I had all this lamb puree that I had
You're like,
made
what
that
do I
it
do?
was all organic, beautiful, and I thought I cannot throw food away. I hate throwing food away, so I made all these like lamb gummies. Anyway, and it became a popular recipe in the book, which was great because it's a great way to use up leftover puree.
Oh, I love that. And I think, like, when people or parents or carers or whoever are looking at this, there is an element of what to do with waste and what to do if it doesn't happen. So if there are ways that you can recycle food,
Mm.
in a way that is palatable and accepted by your child or whoever's trying to eat it, I love that because, food waste, like we're beyond that now. We want to reduce as much as we can. And if worst comes to worst, maybe not for the meat, but if there's veggies, get a worm farm. Maybe that's the plan B if all
Mm.
of your meat gummies don't work.
Yeah.
Now we've spoken about lots of different foods to introduce to our bubs, but I guess I just wanted to I guess, ask a question if there is any difference in terms of when we start getting super diverse in terms of that, because for adults, there's the try to have the 30 different plant-based foods per week. So
Mm.
I guess when we're talking about this very young introductory stage, do we want to keep it slightly more simple, or are we happy to go super diverse once we've really figured out those allergy type things?
Yeah, I guess there's two types of babies here. I guess you've got a baby with no gut issues who's
Hmm.
totally fine and thriving, and
Yep.
it's fine just to offer whatever you want to them, as long as it's not one of those, mixing the allergens if you haven't introduced them. Once you've
Yep.
introduced them a few times, you can mix them, but not for the very first couple of introductions.
Yep.
But you might have a baby with more of a sensitive tummy who might be reacting. Maybe you don't know what they're reacting to. They're just uncomfortable and irritable, and you're not quite sure. And you might want to go a bit slower and have a
Yeah.
slower approach. There's no right or wrong. It's totally up to you. And so you don't have to offer one food a day. You don't have to do a different food every day. You can combine foods from the very beginning, minus those allergens, like I mentioned. But you can also just do one food if you feel like you just want to see how your baby's going with it. One thing I will note though is like eventually we do want them to be eating combined meals, but because we want them to be getting that combination of protein and fats and carbohydrates as well as the micronutrients. But remember that we've got the breast milk and the formula as a buffer. And so they're kind of getting all of that anyway. That's a whole food in itself. So this is just an extra. So if they're just having one piece of lamb cutlet, they don't necessarily need all the veggies to go with it if you're concerned about their gut support
Yeah.
or their gut health, sorry. So yeah, no real right or wrong there.
I love that. I think again, I mean, none of this podcast is ever meant to be like, you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong, but to actually have the answer be a bit more like, well, kind of depends on your baby, which is
Yeah.
really, like you said, your baby will let you know if they're going to be spoon or baby led, and they'll kind of also let you know what they can cope with. So it's, I guess, using that as your North Star really is how is my baby going to make those decisions is hopefully a helpful thing for people to know. Now,
Yeah.
there's lots of things, like you said, even in the last, 10 years from when your oldest was young, there's been a lot of change in what we know. But are there any outdated myths, methods, or things that just we need to stamp out, really correct, related to food allergies, food introduction, or gut health that, is now like outdated? Stop it. Any of those types of things.
I can think of many. I've said a few already, I think.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah. So, yeah, wait till they're 5 for allergens was
Yep.
one.
Yep.
Babies need rice cereal as a first food. It's
Mhm.
definitely not applicable. They don't ever need rice cereal, and we wouldn't recommend it as a food. What else? That, yeah, you need to wait 3 to 5 days between a new food, which used to be sort of the saying that you'd give one food for 3 days and then swap to the next one.
Yep.
Uh, that you should only offer bland foods.
Mm.
That's a big one. We actually think you should be offering really flavoursome foods from the get-go, like the sauerkraut and the liver, because that's when they're going to eat it.
Yep.
They'll get to the bland stage later when
Yeah.
they hit toddlerhood.
Yeah.
So
My
do what you
sister's
can
there
at the
now.
beginning. Yeah, yeah, it's fun. I'm still in it too with my nearly 3. No, oh my God, how old is he? Nearly 4-year old. That's why we wrote Toddler to Table, because he was such a, which is our second book, because he's such a tricky toddler to feed. That was the inspiration for my second book.
Yeah, we'll call it inspiration, not
Yeah.
total.
Yeah. I lived experience.
Yeah,
Um,
that's going to be, and I saw that on your website. People can pre-order that as well.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That constipation's normal. I
Mm.
mentioned that one. The babies can't have any sodium. I think that one's always quite interesting.
Yeah.
Breast milk's actually quite high in sodium, so it's kind of doesn't make any sense. We obviously don't want our kids to be eating, fast food and
For
highly
sure.
processed foods, which is the type of sodium we're talking about
Yes.
removing and reducing. But to say that they can't have any sodium, like if you were to have a family meal and it had a little bit of salt and they can't eat it, is not true. They can. We have a big blog on this if you want some referenced information and
Yeah.
not just
We can
believe
put that in
someone
the show
random
notes
on a
as well.
podcast.
I'll make a note that we can put that link in the podcast because people will probably be like, well, I need to find that now. So we'll make that
Yeah,
easy for them.
yeah. And that's in Milk to Meals too, actually. We got all of that in there. I don't know, there's so many.
Yeah,
Is
no,
that
I
enough
mean
to start with?
that's plenty. I mean, I
Yeah.
was looking for maybe one or two, but we have
Okay.
about 20, so that's
I can
good.
keep going.
People can read up about
Oh,
it,
I should
but
say my favorite one is babies don't need to start solids to sleep through the night. That's a big one because
oh,
so many people think that they need to start their solids at 4 months because their babies start waking up more.
right.
And this actually has nothing to do with needing to start solids. This is actually developmentally normal behavior from our
Mm,
little ones. Sometimes they are having a growth spurt, but it just seems to coincide with when they have an interest in starting solids, but they don't normally sit up. They don't don't normally have that head and neck control that we're talking about. And so they're not actually ready to start solids. They just are showing an interest in the world. So they also are interested in your car keys. It doesn't mean that they want to go for a drive.
That's
So
good to know, good to remember.
yes. So the sleep, if you're worried about their weight or anything like that and they're not ready for solids, I would be talking more to a lactation consultant. Or if you're worried about the sleep, then you might want to go down the route of a sleep someone or other. But solids isn't the answer. Sometimes it can make things worse because their gut's not ready and then they can be up all night with pain and gas.
Yeah, that's good to know as well. Good to debunk. And yeah, I love the key thing as well. It's very true. They're probably not ready to start driving around.
No.
So I guess if people are parents or first-time parents, soon-to-be parents are listening to this and they're feeling a bit overwhelmed, what would be your advice to them?
I would say the biggest thing is read the baby in front of you and try and trust your instincts, which is really hard to do when there's people like me who give out advice and many people who give out differing advice. But it's also about finding the people whose advice resonates with you.
Yes.
Because, like I just mentioned about the sleep thing, you can find someone that says all this, do the sleep training, do the feed the solids, et cetera, et cetera. And if that resonates with you, then that's that's fine, but don't follow those people if it doesn't, because it's just going to confuse you and muddle you up. So block out the white noise and look at the baby in front of you. I would also just say starting solids is a journey, a forever journey, and it's something that keep the goal in mind is to raise kids who love food, who are healthy and love food. Like that's the goal in mind. Doesn't really matter how you get there, but basically we want them to, if your goal is to be able to sit around the table as a family and eat together, keep that in mind all of the time when you're doing things.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. They're excellent parting words and such
Thanks.
kind advice in terms of, yeah, gosh, it's like anything. You want to find and start listening to the people that feel like they're in alignment with yourself, and to listen to the one that's in front of you, because they're kind of driving the bus in a way. Like they're telling you what they need and when they're ready and all that. So I love that, and I think that's a beautiful message for everybody to kind of end on. But if people are wanting to, work with Boob to Food, learn more, just, I guess, feel educated and empowered, how can they do that?
Well, I would say our best resource is Milk to Meals, our book, because we've put everything that we know into one book.
It's amazing.
So that would be my place to start. Basically, we wrote a book that's half information and half recipes, because I found that, I think we brought this book out 5 years ago now. At the time, there was no books like that, there was either recipe books or information, but nothing that kind of encompassed the two things and how to practically do that. So that would be where I would start, but we're probably most active on Instagram, which is just at Boob to Food, or our website.
Cool. And we will put the links there and that salt blog post, I think it was as well. We'll put that link in the show notes. But thank you so much. And I'm going to say it on behalf of my sisters. And thank you for creating Boob to Food. But what you've shared today has been really wonderful. And yeah, I hope parents or soon to be parents or carers feel a lot more empowered with what you've shared. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into Gutsy Talks. I hope today's episode left you feeling inspired to take the next step in your gut health journey. If you're ready to dive deeper, head over to rachellarson.com.au. There's a range of courses and resources waiting for you. If you loved this episode, I'd be so grateful if you shared it with others who might benefit from this information. And so you don't miss out on future Gutsy Talks, be sure to hit follow and leave a review. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'm Rachel Larson, and I can't wait to connect with you again for our next Gutsy Talk.